Okay, I'll review this game. That could take 10 to 25 minutes, and then that's that. And then I end the session at that point. Let's see, almost 80 to almost 74. Not the most accurate game, but not too low to review either. This is some of 3 blunders and 2 misses, 6 mistakes. So let's see how these occurred. They all came in a cluster, then we could just they were mostly dispersed. Well, we're gonna review it because I said we were gonna review it. That's what maybe it'll be a pleasant surprise. I had the white pieces, d4, f6, c4, b6 or g6, bishop g7, knight c3, e4, and I like to play bishop e2 here. Black will castle, and I push on the h file. Black, I've seen this move, pawn to e5. Usually, at this point, I lock the position, meaning just interlocked central pawns, and I take time out specifically to do that, and then I start concerning myself with my h pawn. In this game, I played h5 first, and it seems like that was not the most accurate move. And in that analysis, the Torch 4 Lite considers that not the most accurate move. But after pawn takes d4, pawn to h6, also inaccurate. The point is, black can't take time to capture on c3. If so, and like a straight up keep the pawns alive race, captures on c3, captures on g7, captures on b2, and the point captures on f8. First of all, capturing a major piece. Second of all, queening, which requires immediate attention because it puts my opponent's king in check. And so once that check has been dealt with finally, then my bishop will deal with the pawn on b2. White will win this pawn race. And that was mostly I was going for the vitality of that kind of a position as well. Yeah, was this a wild game? A little bit. And part of that is because I played for this pawn race here. So my opponent wisened up, I thought, at the time with bishop to h8. It's not clear that that's the best move. And the Torch 4 suggests d takes c3 anyway. So let's follow that line, because then h takes g7 still. Rook e8, moving out of the way of the pawn at that moment. So it's an opportune moment. Let's look at this here. I'll actually draw it on this screen. Here with black to move. Capture the knight. I capture the bishop. The rook moves out of the way at exactly the right opportunity. This is not fun for black, but it's also not gonna last. It's so what that the pawn's right there. The king's gonna capture that. White has to take time out to double his pawns on the c file. After which point, black can play rook takes e4, threatening a pawn, pinning the bishop on e2 to his king. And when white does something in response to that, then the pawn on g7 falls. So, awesome line caught here, partially by Torch, and then I kind of fed in some of my own thoughts about it. That's very interesting. Great. Okay. How it happened in the game was my opponent moved back to h8, creating this long-lasting hole on g7. It's not just a hole, it's a protected hole. This pawn is looking very desperately or very wantingly to support a queen on g7 at some point. Not right away, of course, the bishop's there and all that, but it's a long-term positional weakness for black. Queen takes d4, gather the material and protect your knight from being captured. Knight to c6 is developing with tempo. That's advised too. I think queen d1 is fine to repair the battery on the diagonal from d1 to h5. Rook to e8. Now I might have tried f3, but I didn't want to block in my battery again. The bishop and the queen form a battery. So what did I play? Okay, this is a strong move. Bishop g5, addressing the fact that black is overpowering white on the e4 square by pinning one of the pieces contributing to that overpower, the knight on f6. So that's a strong move to keep my e4 pawn at center and on the board. Bishop e6, just about the strongest move on the board, I'd say. Yeah, get your bishop out into play. Knight f3, simple development, cuts off the battery's ability to white doesn't have as strong control over h5 as before. That can be fixed, perhaps if necessary or anything, with like knight h4. It's actually a little bit more stubborn than I thought during the game. Knight to d4, but then knight takes d4, queen takes d4. It's not a battery anymore. I don't know. The knight had to get out. I might consider in retrospect, given that block, knight h3. And the computer is suggesting king f1 or rook c1. King f1, that's a little weird, huh? We're really gonna abandon my option to castle. The computer might be going off of is with the h pawn almost all the way up the board, a knight that needs to be developed, and queenside castling looking pretty ugly too. That king f1 isn't such a bad thing, but let's go into this. What is exactly going on with king f1? Knight e5, b3, c6, rook c1, a6, knight f3. Yeah, that's... Sometimes the computers make errors too. King f1 is not a good move. You wouldn't play that in this position. This is not a good move. Okay. Torch wants bishop g4, opening up the e-file for the rook that's there and putting pressure against the knight at f3. My opponent played queen d7 to form a battery on the light squares. I castled kingside. Bishop g4 adds pressure. So yeah, I'm sure that black should capture on d4, and after queen takes d4, there are attacking options related to the fact that when the knight moves, the queen will be under attack by my opponent's bishop. And then discovered attack, and those tend to be very serious tactical options for both sides to understand. My opponent didn't go for that. Let's see, was it that? Yeah, knight d4, definite strongest move here. My opponent went with the move, or chose the move, decided to move. Bishop takes e2. I take back with the knight and give him just that extra layer of support. He's protected twice now, and if I need to, bishop e3 keeps the piece on the table. I think this pawn on e4 is going to go, it's going to be gone, and all those things. Knight takes e4, bishop e3, knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, best moves, most of these are best move one here. I chose to take off the bishop at h8. Now I think what the computer shows here, and what I agree, what I was kind of thinking, with best play, maybe, at the time I said with best play, maybe he skirts out of this, or my opponent skirts out of this. But I will also be able to force my opponent to find some really difficult best moves, only best moves, those types of moves. The king's gonna capture, going to d4. I do not have a checkmate right away on g7. That's not gonna happen. My opponent will see it and block it somehow. Turns out f6 was not the best way to block. And the one move that actually keeps black in it is here suggested by Torch. Rook to e5. It's still not a fun, it's not a very comfortable position for black. Rook to e5, when I was calculating, I met that with f4. And I see now, as was part of the line in the game, c5 pushes the queen away from the pin just in time for the rook to free himself, one of these squares, from the attack levied by the pawn on f4. I didn't see quite that far. What I saw here was if rook e5, then white plays f4, and I thought I'd be winning the rook at that point, frankly. c5 interpolates here in a way that you can't capture c5. It cuts off other lines on that diagonal. That's not even the thing, but it's attacking my queen, where if she just falls back to c3 to keep the pin, then she's gone, voila, by way of the knight currently placed at e4. That last piece I hadn't got to. But anyway, attacking chess, sometimes you get the benefit of a mistake from your opponent. Pawn to f6, f3, c5, and then the knight comes off. There are two mistakes, there are two blunders and a miss in there. I don't want to go over any more than what I went over already. Then we have rook to e8. And I think I played best move here with queen to d3. This pawn's waiting to be captured. Okay. As a pawn of material, I'm not so worried. It would be nice to have g7 available for a potential mate, or to force a queen swap or something like that. But overall, that's not the main focus of this position for either side, really. Black wants to dominate more in the middle of the board. Things get pretty tactical from here. Black winning the pawn on h6, but white taking up residence on d5 with a really strongly outposted knight. This is the moment where you think c7 to c6 is going to do it for black. That's the only way to push this knight away from there. Yes, but black has some things to tend to before even that's all that good. The f6 pawn is tough to push. Then you're leaving this rook on h6 partially stranded. So you would think maybe instead of that, black might play queen to f7. Cover some of the open e file, and then still covering c7, right? We got to continue to protect c7 before we can push c7 to get this knight back the heck away from black's territory. I use we as black there, so I've played black before, so But no, the point is she's got to maintain control over the pawn at c7. She moves to d8. Most of this is just reasonably accurate tactics and certain ideas. Pawn to g5. To open up protection on f6 a second time. That's creative. I like it. Keeping the rooks stacked in case if I vacate the back rank, there could be ways to win the a1 rook. King to f2. And now things get strong here for white, but maybe ugly for black. We're gonna trade both rooks for the queen. It's a weird trade. Technically, the side that loses the queen does better in terms of material, but it's very awkward sometimes to maintain control of the rooks against the queen. Depending on what other material balances or imbalances. Anyway, 2 rooks for a queen, but I also get the pawn on f6 out of the whole deal. I'm bringing the knight back to e4. I think now in retrospect, both d5 and g4 were due some extra consideration. Knight d5's a mate in 13. I don't normally calculate mate in 13, but I love that they're indicated and the way they're indicated. Whew. We could take some time out to tell you about learning about playing and learning and mostly playing and learning chess with the help of modern computer technology. I don't want to get too close into it, who developed which this moment. Look, amazing. You guys are amazing. I love it. Thank you. Now, knight to e4. I didn't get this one. Yeah, I gotta be a little bit critical here, my friends. Rook to a1. think maybe trying to make way for rook at 6 to h1 and then get into some trouble on the first rank against my king who's here at f2. Okay. And then there's also rook takes a2 for the pawn, and also perhaps my queen goes on a jaunt away from protecting b2. Then rook takes b2 check could be a thing. Overall, though, I thought that there were more pressing matters, and the position, and then once again the position is not also good for black at this point, right? There's a bully, some moves. Now I want to say something. I'm looking at the I'm looking at the evaluation bar. Evaluation bars are high as long ago as like here. Um, move 29. The computer is calculating all this out. And it all depends. A whole lot of it depends on Queen G7 check. I didn't calculate that when I went in for this. When I'm playing this live, I see that I have one pawn material advantage, and I'm aware that I have some good a good central knight and good attacking chances with the queen free to levy checks and so on. But to take that one pawn material advantage and think of it as equivalent to 8 pawns of material, I didn't thought of that I'd. But sometimes you get there when you get there, even if the computer sees it way in advance. In this case, you get there when you get there with Queen G7. The computer had calculated this all the way down the line, but Queen G7 check brings about Queen takes H6. And one other thing, it's not exactly how I said that, but to think of this thematically or in the thought space, that's kind of what happens. Torch 4 knew that there was a material grab somewhere way in advance of when I would thought Queen G7 to pick up a rook on H6. And now I feel comfortable. I have more time than my opponent and a lot more material. I just have to avoid any one total blunder. As I lose 2 pawns for 1 here, but get in exchange a safe place for my king on G3. That's going to make it difficult for my opponent to give checks, which cost time to move, because they're hard to predict when they occur, and you're not exactly sure where your king will go. Anyway, we had some moves here in a bit of a time scramble. I dumped the knight partially for time and partially for mistakes that occur during time scrambles, like king a5 and then white's gonna, you can see this is inaccurate with just less than 20 seconds aside. We're gonna find some inaccuracies, but that's part of the game. Now here, okay, so note to self that queen to f7, alright, well, it takes care of this pawn, but I got a king and a pawn doing that as well, so I might have better started marching my pawn up the f file here. In terms of future games, that's the thing, and I took care of it anyway. But in terms of this game, look, it eventually settled, and I had a blast playing it. I might play a little bit against the. I'll play a little bit. I'm gonna take over here, see what the computer shows for black's 42nd move. So it's gonna catch c5. control, I would play queen b5. With the capture, it's actually turned into a draw, so good thing I don't always have time trouble. I guess a bit safer than queen e7 check. Pace bucks. Promotion attempts. Typically a human player here will play pawn to a5 instead of chasing down this pawn. Okay. Look over some of the other games I've played today. Not intensely. We're almost finished with this broadcast. If you have somewhere to go, there's not much of substance left. I am gonna check my best games history. Let's see. Just get in touch with today, and it looks like I only played 2 games. All right. Here, this game is a little bit frustrating. I'll let that. I'm gonna review this on my own, I think. This is pending review. Okay. Alright, so that's about right. Yep, cool. Very cool. Like it. Okay. And the other game, that's this game. Okay. My hat's off to my opponent here. 2 brilliant moves and 5 great moves in this game. Let's review. I'm going to just let it play pretty much, so that we can be appreciative of my opponent's brilliant moves. Here they come. 2 in a row here. And again, forces of 8 and 4. Alright, I say raw to my opponent Ben Hammerly for a game well played all the way, with 2 brilliant moves and 5 great moves. Later on I'll put this in one of my albums and folders. Alright, thank you for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.